For as long as I can remember, my life has revolved around meticulous planning and hard work. My parents instilled in me the value of perseverance, which shaped my journey into engineering, a field where precision and adaptability are key. I spent my college years buried in textbooks and internships, determined to carve a path in the competitive industry. That determination paid off when I landed a role at a top design build firm shortly after graduation. Over the years, I've embraced the challenges of my career with enthusiasm. From late nights drafting project plans to early mornings on construction sites, I poured my energy into every detail. My responsibilities expanded when I became chief engineer, a role that demanded not only technical expertise, but also leadership and quick decision-making. Yet with every achievement, there was a price to pay: long hours, constant travel, and the strain it placed on my personal life. Despite the demanding schedule, I believed I'd found balance in my marriage. Reagan was my anchor, someone who understood the pressures of my job and supported me through thick and thin, or so I thought. She often joked about how unpredictable my travel schedule was, but her lighthearted remarks reassured me that she didn't mind. I assumed our bond was strong enough to weather the storms, and I worked hard to ensure she never felt neglected. Still, there were moments of doubt, times when I questioned if I was devoting enough time to my personal life. My frequent absence weighed on me, and I tried to compensate by making the most of my time at home. It was during one of those short-lived breaks, after returning from yet another business trip, that I first felt the faint tremors of unease, a subtle shift in the dynamics of my relationship with Reagan. Several years ago, while leading engineering projects for a construction firm, I often found myself on the road whenever challenges demanded immediate attention. One particular week followed this familiar pattern. With a 7:21 a.m. departure from Hartsfield-Jackson, I was up before dawn ensuring everything was in order before heading to Baton Rouge. By Tuesday afternoon, I was immersed in problem-solving on-site, collaborating with the team to address complications that had cropped up. Although I trusted Etherly, our project manager, to handle things moving forward, I decided to keep a closer watch to ensure no further issues arose. Wednesday afternoon, I drove to New Orleans to meet coworkers. Mary Jo Pilecki, a friend I'd trained years ago, was overseeing a project there but was set to begin maternity leave soon. Knowing her impending absence, I reviewed her documentation for her replacement. As I expected, Mary Jo had everything under control. After dinner with Mary Jo and her husband Wednesday evening and a Thursday morning team meeting, I flew back and arrived at the office by 1:45 p.m. I updated my boss, Mr. Strickland, on the situation in Baton Rouge, recommended tighter oversight, and briefed him on Mary Jo's team. He agreed with my suggestions and told me to take the rest of the day off after filing my expense report. Once I finished the report, I texted my wife, Reagan, to let her know I'd be home early. Just as I was about to leave, Ethan Gardner, my best friend since childhood and a coworker, walked into my office and closed the door. "Hey, Trent, how was the trip?" Ethan asked. "Long but productive," I replied. "Etherly should manage if he stays on top of things, but honestly, I'm beat, and Mr. Strickland told me to head out early." Ethan's expression turned serious. I joked, "Relax, Ethan, I'm not fired. I just need a break after this trip. I'm planning to grab flowers and wine to surprise Reagan. Anything work-related can wait." Ethan interrupted. "Trent, this isn't about work. It's about Reagan." Panic gripped me. "What's wrong with her?" He hesitated before blurting out, "She's messing around while you're traveling." I stared at him in disbelief. Reagan had always been honest about her free-spirited past, but she left that behind when we committed to each other. "That's not funny, Ethan. I don't appreciate it. You should leave and rethink our friendship." Ethan sighed. "I know it's not funny, Trent, but I think it's true. I heard it from Jake Campbell, who heard it from Clay, whose friend was involved with her. Apparently, he wasn't the only one. And that's why it got out." Furious, I snapped, "It's not true. Don't repeat this nonsense. If you do, I'll make sure you regret it." Ethan, clearly upset, handed me a card. "I wouldn't tell you if I wasn't certain. Here's the number for a private investigator my cousin used. If you don't believe me, let her confirm it." He left, leaving me seething, torn between disbelief in his claims and anger at the betrayal of trust. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the rush of blood pounding in my temples. It didn't fully work, but it helped me focus. Ethan was my best friend since childhood, ever since his family moved in next door. We'd always been close. In high school, I was the athlete who pulled us out of trouble when his calm reasoning didn't work. He was the nerd who kept us out of trouble when my temper flared. Even though we went to different colleges, we stayed in touch. And 6 years ago, I helped him get a job at my firm. We'd been co-workers ever since, during my entire relationship with Reagan. As angry as I was about Ethan's accusations, I knew he wasn't trying to hurt me. He genuinely believed what he was saying and thought he was protecting me. "Your cousin's wife, was she really cheating?" I asked. Ethan grimaced. "Yeah, he divorced her, but they still see each other for the kids. He loves them, or he'd have destroyed her by now." Apologizing again, he took a call and left me to process everything. Alone, I mulled over his accusations. While I felt sorry for Ethan's cousin, my heart went out to the kids. They hadn't chosen their parents or the mess they were born into. It struck me harder because Reagan and I were planning to start a family, hoping for at least 2 kids, maybe 3. I tried to brush off Ethan's claims on the drive home, but the thought lingered, gnawing at me. I couldn't believe it. I refused to believe it. Still, it was hard to shake how serious Ethan seemed. When I considered telling Reagan, I decided against it. Why upset her over a lie? After a quick grocery stop, I walked in, and she greeted me with her usual warmth, throwing her arms around me. "You're home early," she exclaimed before kissing me. "I missed you too," I said, smiling. Watching her, I thought about how ridiculous the rumor was. Reagan loved me. She'd never cheat. Still, I couldn't ignore that Ethan genuinely believed what he said. I needed to clear this up, not to prove anything to myself, but to protect our friendship. That night, after Reagan fell asleep, I lay awake, wrestling with how to handle it. By Friday morning, I had a plan. I'd hire the private investigator Ethan recommended, not to catch Reagan in anything but to prove her innocence. I called Donna Hightower's office and scheduled the first available appointment for Monday afternoon. Using my private investment account, I planned to pay for the investigation quietly, ensuring Reagan never found out about the rumor or my steps to dispel it. When Miss Hightower confirmed what I already knew, I'd be able to put the whole mess to rest, for Ethan's sake and mine. At 2 o'clock, I was escorted to a conference room by a secretary where a tall, elegant black woman stood to greet me. She wore tailored black slacks, a crisp white blouse, and a red scarf. "Good afternoon, Mr. Giro. I'm Donna Hightower. How can we help you?" she said with a firm handshake. Her website indicated she was a retired police officer in her mid-50s, though she appeared younger. Her warm smile contrasted with her sharp, observant gaze. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice. I'm Trent Dro. My problem is straightforward. I travel often for work, and someone spread a rumor that my wife is cheating. I want you to prove it's not true." Miss Hightower listened intently as I explained the situation. Her questions were insightful, focusing on details about the allegation and my wife Reagan, including her past relationships. When she finally set her pen down, she asked, "Mr. Dro, how familiar are you with philosophy, the legal system, and the concept of the burden of proof?" Caught off guard, I admitted, "Not very," she explained. "Proving a negative, like your wife never cheating, is nearly impossible. I can observe her for a set time and verify her actions, but I can't confirm she hasn't done something in the past. However, under the right circumstances, we can infer patterns and behaviors that might support her innocence." I understood the limits of what she could offer, but decided to move forward, spending hours with her team detailing Reagan's habits and planning how to proceed. The first step came on a hot Sunday after a circuit breaker tripped in our home. By the afternoon, the house was noticeably warmer, and Reagan complained. I went downstairs to check the breaker, but couldn't fix the issue. "I'll call the HVAC service," I told her. "Please do," she replied, annoyed. I dialed the HVAC service number, let the automated system play out, and then hung up. Next, I called the number Hightower had provided. "Hello, this is Trent Dro. The AC isn't working. Can you send someone over?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning at 10, the voice on the other end replied. "Thanks, that'll work," I said. Reagan overheard and smirked. "Looks like we're sleeping in the guest room tonight, like a hotel stay," she joked. I smiled back, knowing this setup was part of the investigation. I felt better than I had since Ethan handed me the ridiculous accusation. There was no way Reagan could love me so deeply and still betray me like that. Monday morning, Reagan asked me to toss the sheets in the wash before my shower. I worked from home that day to meet the HVAC technician, a subcontractor recommended by Hightower's investigation service. At 10 a.m., he arrived, installed discrete motion-activated cameras, and explained their capabilities. They could record everything needed for legal purposes, but were subtle enough to go unnoticed. I paid him, thanked him, and went back to work. That evening, I told Reagan about my extended work trip to Tampa and Orlando, explaining I wouldn't return until late Friday. "I'll miss you," she said, smiling as she led me to the couch. I love you, Trent. I love you too, I replied, confident in our marriage despite the baseless rumors. In Tampa, meetings went smoothly, and I resolved minor issues in Orlando. My on-site presence helped keep the team on track. Though I could have flown back early, I didn't try. Reagan wasn't expecting me until Friday night, giving her the full opportunity for surveillance. I used the extra time to work and visited a local tool range, renting a couple of pistols to unwind. Friday night traffic was brutal, but I was relieved to finally reach home. Reagan greeted me warmly, bringing me a beer as we relaxed on the couch. Her love and care erased the stress of the week. Saturday, Reagan went to the gym while I tackled yard work. Afterward, I checked my email and was relieved to find nothing unusual. On Sunday afternoon, while Reagan ran errands, I checked again and found a message from Hightower's team, a vague update about my order being ready. My hands shook as I deleted it. When Reagan returned, she noticed I wasn't myself. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm not feeling great," I replied, avoiding her kisses. "Let me make dinner while you rest." She hugged me, and I caught a floral scent that wasn't her usual shampoo or perfume. It lingered in my mind as I lay awake that night. Could it just be from a store? I didn't want to doubt her, but the scent and the message unsettled me deeply. Something felt off, even though I desperately wanted to believe there was nothing to worry about. I arrived at Miss Hightower's office Monday morning, just before 11 a.m. She greeted me in the same conference room as before, gesturing for me to sit. "Mr. Giro, we've concluded our investigation ahead of schedule, but I'm afraid I have bad news." She slid a file across the table. I opened it, skipping the report and going straight to the photos. My world shattered. There was Reagan in our bedroom with a man, then another photo. A different man, still in our bedroom. "We documented her with 3 men in 4 encounters through Saturday and Sunday," Miss Hightower said. "One meeting even took place at a private home." Stunned, I muttered. "But she went shopping yesterday." "She did," Miss Hightower replied. "After meeting one of her lovers on Saturday, she ran errands. On Sunday, she only went to the grocery store. Receipts or credit card records could confirm it if she didn't use cash." I whispered, "She said she was going to the gym on Saturday." Miss Hightower shook her head. "Judging by the hotel photos, she was doing something gymnastic, but not at a real gym." Anger replaced disbelief. "In our bed?" "Yes, twice during your trip. She even changed the sheets between lovers. She's careful about appearances, likely to avoid leaving evidence." I clenched my fists. "And the flowers?" Her hair smelled of flowers. "Did she shower after seeing them?" "Possibly, or she may have used a spray. She's meticulous, but her actions are deliberate," Miss Hightower said. "Based on her behavior, she might have a condition like hypersexuality disorder, though I'm no psychiatrist." As I flipped through the file, I froze at a photo of one of the men. "I think she works with him." Miss Hightower nodded. "That's Noah Woolliver, 32, married, and likely her boss. He has no criminal record but unpaid parking tickets. They met at a bar Wednesday, then went to your house. On Saturday, they met at a hotel, and Sunday at his residence." She added, "If Mrs. Woolliver had arrived minutes earlier, things might have gotten messy." I sighed. Reagan once told me she was wild in college, but had changed. She said she wanted to settle down and loved me. I believed her. My voice faltered, and Miss Hightower patted my arm gently. I stared at the photo of Noah Woolliver, anger boiling inside me. My mind raced with thoughts of what I wanted to do to this lying, cheating man. Miss Hightower firmly grabbed my arm, forcing me to meet her eyes. "Mr. Giro, I'm deeply sorry, but don't let your pain drive you to act out of character. Many people seek revenge when hurt like this, but going too far could ruin your life. Jail, losing your job, and destroying your future won't fix this. It's her mistake, not yours." I nodded reluctantly, though my mind was swirling. I wouldn't let anger consume me, but I'd make her pay, carefully. "Don't worry, Miss Hightower, I'll stay in control, but she'll feel every ounce of the pain she caused me." She sighed, but didn't argue further. "Just be careful. Don't let this come back to haunt you." She referred me to her uncle, George C. Godwin, a seasoned divorce attorney. I spent hours at Piedmont Park planning my next steps before meeting him. George was the opposite of his niece. Short, jovial, and informal, but just as sharp. He reviewed the evidence and quickly got to work. "This is solid," George said, impressed with Miss Hightower's thoroughness. "I'll have everything ready by next Monday, but expedited work will cost extra." "Do it," I replied. I also outlined a specific request for my case. George warned me to tread carefully, noting that appearances matter in court as much as the law. I agreed, forcing a weak smile. Late Monday night, I arrived home, feigning illness to avoid Reagan. I showered and tried to block her from my mind, focusing instead on the steps ahead. Tuesday morning, I quietly left for a flight to Charlotte. Thursday night, I made a difficult call. "Ethan, it's Trent. I owe you a huge apology. You were right. I was completely wrong. She played me." Ethan forgave me instantly, offering his support. I spent Friday avoiding Reagan, pretending to be too tired to engage. On Saturday, I went to my parents' house to help with a project, using it as an excuse to get away. Though I wanted to tell my dad everything, I held back, knowing it wasn't the right time. I would wait until the dust settled, ensuring my plans stayed on track. Late Saturday night, I called Reagan to let her know I wouldn't be home until Sunday afternoon. Her tone made it clear she wasn't home, and likely not alone. I kept my cool, ending the call with a fake "love you." On Sunday afternoon, while Reagan was out, likely with one of her lovers, I got a text from Mr. Godwin confirming everything was ready. The bailiff would serve her papers at 11 a.m. Monday as requested and notify me once it was done. I left a note for Reagan saying I had work to handle and drove to my office, finalizing my plans. She called twice, and I lied, saying I'd be late but promised we'd spend Monday night together. She sounded thrilled and confessed her love, a bitter irony I ignored. That night, I quietly slipped into bed knowing it would be the last time. The next morning, after she left for work, I labeled my belongings with painter's tape, marking what was mine. Anything else I planned to leave behind or donate. At 8 a.m., Ethan arrived with movers. I packed while Ethan supervised the crew, ensuring all my possessions were loaded onto the truck for storage. I discreetly moved my firearms to my dad's safe earlier, ensuring nothing of value was left behind. When Reagan's friend Amy noticed the moving truck, I quickly intercepted her. "Shh, it's a surprise," I said with a grin. "I'm swapping out old furniture for our upcoming anniversary. Don't mention it to Reagan until she tells you herself." Amy smiled, agreeing to keep the secret. By noon, rumors would likely spread, but by then, it wouldn't matter. I tipped the movers generously, thanked Ethan, and headed to the bank. I withdrew half of our joint account funds and deposited them into a new account I'd set up. Then I closed our shared credit card, ensuring a clean financial break. At 10:45 a.m., I parked in a Sandy Springs lot and prepared to send my carefully drafted email. The process server texted updates as Reagan arrived at her office. At 11 a.m., the papers were served. I uploaded the email to our shared family account and sent it to friends and family. It announced our separation and included 3 photos showing Reagan and Noah together, time-stamped for clarity. To avoid going too far, I cropped and blurred the photos to keep them appropriate but undeniable. The message didn't go to Reagan or Noah. I wanted them blindsided. Satisfied everything was in order, I logged out, closed my laptop, and sat back. The storm I'd planned had begun. At 11:30, Reagan called, her voice panicked. "Trent, what's this about a divorce? Why? I thought we were happy. Did you find someone else?" I laughed bitterly. "Happy? I thought so too, until I found out what you were doing. Check the back of the envelope in the package from my lawyer." I heard her swearing and pleading, insisting she loved me, just as she had in front of God and everyone at our wedding 5 years ago. "Trent, it's not what it looks like," she shouted. "Really? No," I replied. "Let me explain," she begged. "Not interested. My attorney's contact info is in the packet. Talk to him." I hung up mid-sentence and ignored her repeated calls. She left voicemails and texts filled with denials and excuses. Without reading or listening, I deleted them all, then blocked her number. Next, I called her father. "Hi, Bob. It's Trent. I hate to bother you at work, but this is important. I wanted you to hear it from me first. The marriage is over," I said. I heard him gulp. "What happened, son?" "Reagan's broken her vows. I have proof. Dates, times, photos, and video. It's been eliminating me, but I can't trust her anymore. The papers were filed this morning, and she's been served." "No, I can't believe it," Bob replied, his voice trembling. "She promised me she was past all this." "She promised all of us, Bob. But she broke those promises. I loved her deeply, but it's over. I wanted to tell you personally because I respect you and Chessie." Bob expressed deep regret and heartbreak over what Reagan had done. We ended the call on somber terms. I left a voicemail for Chessie, suspecting Bob had already called her. By 11:16, it was time for the next part of my plan, a step I had debated but ultimately decided to follow through on. Disguised with sunglasses, a baseball cap, and a fake delivery lanyard, I headed into a building, gum in my mouth for extra flair. At the security desk, I introduced myself. "Hi, TC Dro from Sunshine Couriers. I've got a special package for Mrs. Melissa Wooliver," I said. The guard frowned. "Packages go to the receiving center downstairs." "Not this one. Court rules require personal ID and a signature. I can keep it quiet, or we can make a scene. Your choice," I responded. The guard hesitated. "What do you want?" "I just need to meet her in the lobby, get her ID and signature, and be out in 5 minutes. No hassle," I said. Reluctantly, he nodded. "You'll need a visitor pass, and I'll hold your ID until you return it." I handed over my driver's license, received the badge, and headed upstairs, my plan perfectly in motion. I headed to the elevator, chewing gum, and once on the 3rd floor, approached the front desk at Melissa Wooliver's firm. After some hesitation, the receptionist summoned her. I tossed my gum, removed my cap, and stored it in my bag, shedding any remnants of my disguise. Melissa arrived, her concerned expression betraying unease. She was a striking woman, likely in her late 20s or early 30s, with tanned skin and deep brown eyes. "Joan said you have something for me to sign," she said hesitantly. "No signature is required, Mrs. Wooliver. I'm Trent Giroux, and I'm here because your husband has been having an affair with my wife." I handed her a cropped photo of them in bed. "This envelope contains proof, dates, times, photos, and confirmation from private investigators." Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "It has to be fake. Noah promised me." "It's not fake," I said quietly. "I hired professionals to investigate rumors about my wife. They confirmed the affair and gathered undeniable evidence." Still crying, she leaned into me. "He said the first time was a mistake, that it wouldn't happen again. We worked through it. How could he do this again?" "I can't say why," I replied. "But it wasn't a one-time mistake. They met 3 times in 5 days." She clung to my shirt, shaking her head as the betrayal sank in. After a moment, she stepped back, wiping her tear-streaked cheeks. "I gave him another chance, but this is it. It's over. We'll end up in court." I've included a recommendation for a private investigator and an attorney in the envelope. They've been a great help to me. She nodded, took the envelope, and started to leave, but stopped. "Mr. Giroux, can I call you if I need advice?" "My number is in the envelope," I replied. After leaving, I visited the testing lab recommended by Miss Hightower, anxious about the risks Reagan had exposed me to. For days, as I managed a project in South Georgia, I couldn't escape the fear of a possible STD. By week's end, relief finally came. The lab confirmed I was clean. Grateful to have avoided that fallout, my anger toward Reagan deepened for the reckless risks she'd taken for meaningless flings. Reagan kept trying to contact me, leaving voicemail after voicemail on my work and cell phones, even using other numbers. I deleted each one as soon as I heard her voice, but she didn't take the hint. By Friday morning, more messages had piled up. After deleting them, I blocked her number. Over the weekend, I visited my parents, only to find she'd been contacting them too. My mom, upset and knowing we'd planned to have kids, begged me to reconsider the divorce. I shook my head and showed her a cropped photo with a timestamp. Tears ran down her face as she hugged my dad, finally understanding. I left them and returned to my temporary living arrangements. At work the next day, Andy Smith burst into my office before noon. "Trent, Mary Jo Bilecki's water broke early. What do we do?" Andy was supposed to cover Mary Jo's leave, but his current project wasn't ready to wrap up. After reviewing schedules, we proposed that I take over the New Orleans job, allowing Andy to focus on his project. Mr. Strickland agreed, and by evening I was en route to New Orleans, distancing myself further from Reagan. Mary Jo and her newborn twins were reported to be doing well. The next day, I met with subcontractors and reviewed plans at the job site before visiting Mary Jo in the hospital. I gave her a small gift and congratulated her. Seeing her twins on the NICU monitor brought me joy, but also sorrow, as I realized I might never have children of my own. I buried those thoughts and threw myself into the project. By Friday, I took the team out for drinks in the French Quarter to unwind. On Monday, George Godwin called to update me on the divorce, sharing that Reagan was bombarding his office with increasingly hysterical calls. "Are you sure you don't want to talk to her?" he asked, laughing at my sarcastic response. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. "Hey Trent, my lawyer filed the paperwork and Noah has been served. Can we talk? Melissa W." I texted back, and moments later, my phone rang. "Thanks for talking, Trent," Melissa said. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "It's hard, but I'll get through it," she replied, her voice wavering. She thanked me for revealing the affair and stopping her from acting on anger. "You could have taken advantage of me when I was vulnerable, but you didn't. You made me pause and think." We were both hurting, Melissa. Acting on those feelings wouldn't have helped either of us, I said. We talked briefly before wishing each other luck. While I empathized with her pain, I knew my focus needed to remain on moving forward and dealing with the fallout in my own way. Work in New Orleans was going well, but I was still overseeing the Baton Rouge project and advising on others. It felt like I was in a swamp, overwhelmed by everything. 2 weeks later, George called. "Reagan's lawyer wants a consultation with the judge. If it happens, you'll need to meet with her in Atlanta." "What do you want me to do?" George asked. I was furious, but George had warned me this could happen. "We didn't include all the evidence of her infidelity. What if the judge sees it?" I replied. "We'll have to give it to her lawyer, but Judge Johnson might cancel the request. If not, we'll warn him first," George said. A week later, Reagan's request for counseling was denied, although the judge suggested she might need counseling for sexual dependence. That was one problem down. For the next few months, I kept a low profile, unsure if Reagan had hired someone to find me. I updated my will and life insurance to ensure she wouldn't benefit if anything happened to me. Meanwhile, I visited Mary Jo and Ozzy's newborn twins, helping out with babysitting and enjoying the time spent with them. I prayed for children of my own, though I hoped they'd come one at a time. Melissa Wooliver also reached out several times, offering support during my own difficult time. But I kept our interactions strictly platonic due to legal and personal boundaries. As things improved for Melissa, her messages stopped. I bought a house in Dunwoody, using funds from my pre-Regan account, just before Mary Jo returned to work after her maternity leave. The twins were thriving, but I knew I would miss seeing them grow. When MJ returned to work, it marked the end of my unofficial babysitting role. I'd grown attached to the twins, and caring for them reminded me of my own unfulfilled desire for children, a pain caused by Reagan's betrayal. Back in Atlanta, the divorce dragged on. George assured me Judge Johnson was as frustrated as I was and that the end was near. I moved into my new home, unpacked, and met a few neighbors, including a divorced woman, Noel. While she invited me for dinner, I politely declined, still bound by the ongoing divorce and cautious about the legal implications. Ethan, who had no clue about the Georgia court system, didn't quite get it. After I returned to Atlanta, he asked, "When are you going to start dating again?" "When the judge finalizes my divorce and I know anything I do won't affect the settlement with Reagan," I replied. "So, it's going to be a while. How's she doing?" Ethan asked. "I don't know, and I don't care," I said. "You still owe her," he pointed out. "I know," I replied, "and she'll get what's coming to her when the time's right." By April, Judge Johnson had had enough of the delays. He ordered both of us to appear in court for closing statements. I arrived early and waited for George when I saw Reagan approaching. "Trent, this isn't how it was supposed to be," she said. "I know, but you didn't keep your vows, so this is how it is," I responded. "You were gone so much?" she argued. "That's nonsense," I shot back. "You knew my schedule when we married. When I went over it, I made up for it. You didn't. You made up for it with your boss and other men while I was away, and after I returned," her eyes filled with tears and her face reddened. "But I had needs." She noticed people watching us and asked, "Can we talk somewhere else?" "No need," I said. "We talked about all this before. You promised you'd stop your wandering and wanted a family. You got married, but you failed. Get over it." I did. Or get another therapist. She recoiled from my words, clearly upset. I turned and left her standing there, still in tears, as George walked toward me. "Trent, please," she called out. But George and I entered the courtroom. Judge Johnson insisted we be there when the divorce was finalized, likely to keep Reagan from stalling. He noted that it was the first time he'd seen us together, which set her off. She cried, but he silenced her before delivering the ruling. The gavel fell, ending both the case and our 5-year marriage. Afterward, I shook George's hand and thanked him. As I turned to leave, Reagan rushed toward me, begging, but I ignored her. She started shouting, using profanity. She knew better than to act that way in court, but her anger took over. I'm not sure if the court staff arrested her, but George and I used the moment to slip out. The next day, George filed for a restraining order, which Judge Johnson granted without hesitation. It was a relief. Reagan would stay away, and I didn't have to deal with her anymore. Part of me hoped she'd resist, maybe even end up in jail for a short time, but she was too smart for that. She disappeared from my life for good. The next weekend, I began dating again, reconnecting with Noel for a rescheduled date. She was nice, but it quickly became clear that we didn't have much in common, except for a lengthy dry spell. When I drove her home, she invited me inside, and I didn't resist. A few moments later, we were in her bedroom. After the second time, we both smiled, and Noel curled up next to me. "Trent, we can do this again sometime if you want," she said, confirming my suspicion from dinner that she wasn't looking for anything long-term or permanent. I thanked her and walked home. A few minutes later, Noel and I stayed casual friends, but never saw each other again. The next weekend, I dated another woman, then another in Birmingham the following week. After each date, I felt devastated, often in more ways than one, realizing that despite the enjoyment, I was no closer to finding the right woman. I wanted a friend, a lover, and a lifelong partner with whom I could eventually start a family. Over the next 2 months, I began to doubt whether this would ever happen or if I'd ever find lasting happiness. However, short-term happiness came often and was enjoyable until Independence Day weekend, when I visited my parents and spent time with my sister, her husband, and their 4 children. Mom, knowing me better than I realized, told me that day, "You'll probably never give your dad and me grandchildren if you don't change something." "I know, Mom. I bought a house and I'm fixing it up," I replied. "Trent, a house isn't a home yet. A man and a good woman, not one of those strumpets you've been dating, can make it a home if they work at it. Son, you need to find a good woman." "I know that, Mom, and someday I will. I'll find her. Just give me time." She hummed, "If we give you more time, your father and I will be dead by then and never meet our grandchildren." She was partly teasing, but it still made me think. One evening in late July, I got a text. "Hi, Trent, it's Melissa Willever. Can you talk sometime when you have a minute?" Honestly, I was surprised to hear from her after all this time. I finished cleaning the paint sprayer and replied quickly, asking her to call when she could. A few minutes later, she called. "Hey, Trent, thanks for agreeing to talk to me," Melissa said. "No problem, Melissa. How are you? We haven't talked in a while, and that's partly why I was hesitant to message you tonight. I wasn't sure if, with everything that's happened, you'd want to talk again," I replied. I laughed. "Unless you were actively involved in getting my ex-wife and your husband—" "Ex-husband as of today," she cut in. "Together, then I don't blame you for what happened between them or the mess they made. So I've got no reason not to talk." "Good, because I swear I had nothing to do with it," she said. "And I didn't think you did. So what's going on?" I asked. "Well, it took longer than expected, but like I said, I'm finally free. I even got my maiden name back, Ortiz, and I wanted to thank you. You opened my eyes to what the idiot was doing, gave me evidence for free so I didn't have to spend money I couldn't afford, and gave me advice. I went to another lawyer, but you really helped me, Trent, and I'm grateful," she explained. "You're welcome. So don't think about it anymore, okay?" I said. "It's hard, Trent, because you were my guiding light, my inspiration when I was so low and depressed. I don't know you well, but I like what I've seen so far, so I'm going to take a chance and do something I've never done before. Won't you have dinner with me?" she asked. The dinner was wonderful, but I spent the whole night thinking about how sweet and beautiful she was, and what kind of ex-husband the world's biggest idiot would have to be to leave her, rather than focusing on what we were eating. Reagan was just as beautiful, with her own special kind of sexuality, but after discovering her hidden dark side, the side that would betray the man she was supposed to love above all others, her former score of 11 dropped to negative numbers in my eyes. "You're staring," Melissa said with a smirk, "almost as much as I do." I grinned and nodded. "It's fun to focus when you've got someone so nice to focus on." She blushed and covered her mouth to hide how much she liked my compliment. "You want to get out of here and maybe come back to my place?" "I think I'd like that," she whispered. "Please, Trent, take me home or somewhere. Now. I need it, and I can't wait." A few minutes later, as we turned onto her street, she reached into her purse and pulled out her cell phone. "Pull into the garage," she said. "The door's open." That night, we didn't leave the bed except for drinks or bathroom breaks. I was grateful it was a Saturday as I didn't have to work, because I could have stayed with her forever. She fell asleep after our morning date, and I sighed in relief before heading to the bathroom. As I stepped out, the morning sunlight poured through the open curtain, and I finally got a good look at her bedroom. Our clothes were scattered all over the floor, and I smiled at the memory of our passion. The double bed was the only thing I recognized, along with her pile of pillows, some of which had been knocked to the floor. The TV sat on a stand beside the chair, angled so she could watch it from bed. But it was Melissa's dresser that grabbed my attention. There were several photos on it, and I quickly glanced at them before something made me stop. It might have been rude, but I picked up one of the pictures to examine it closer. "Trent, what are you doing?" Melissa asked from the bed. "Melissa, who's the girl in these photos?" I asked, holding up the picture. "That's my daughter, Ansley. She's 3, and she means the world to me," Melissa replied. Her words caught me off guard, actually shocked me. And I said, "You never mentioned her." I didn't want to bring her into the Noah situation, so I tried to keep her out of it. But she ended up being a huge obstacle in the divorce. That's why it took so long. "Trent, I don't want us to be seeing each other until we're sure there's something real between us," she explained. "Where is she now?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but I'm sure it went up a little. "She's with him this weekend." "Why? Is something wrong?" Melissa asked. I liked her a lot, but this was a shock, a real surprise, and the implications, though unclear at the moment, hit me. "Melissa, I don't know. I really like you. I like you more than I should. But if there's one person I don't love as much as my ex-wife, it's your ex-husband. It's the same situation either way." That's what my grandmother would have called this match. "I've already told you I want kids, so you can imagine I'd want to be involved in your daughter's life if things worked out," I said. "But think about this. If I show up at her soccer game, piano recital, cheerleading practice, school dance, or whatever, who else will be there?" "Noah," she sighed, starting to grasp what I was getting at. "He's a lying, cheating idiot, but he loves her." Exactly. And every time I see him at one of those events, it'll remind me of what he did to my ex and the role he played in destroying my marriage. I'll resent him, and I think Ansley, even though she won't understand, will sense the tension between us. Eventually, she'll start resenting me, which will hurt my relationship with her, and in turn, hurt our relationship. As much as it pains me to say it, I think it would ruin everything we have. She sat up, and almost in a whisper, she said, "You're saying we have no future?" As much as I'd like to be wrong, no, I don't think we do, I agreed. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I thought it was too easy, too perfect. Now I know it was. Please, Trent, just go. The garage door will be open for you." She tapped her phone a few times and collapsed back onto the bed, pulling the sheet over herself as she cried. I gathered my clothes and dressed in the hallway as I left, hating myself at every turn, almost as much as I hated her ex-husband. It hurt, but deep down, I knew it was the right decision. Later, I went to my parents' house and gave them the short version. They could tell I was holding back and that I was hurting more than I cared to admit. Mom tried to get more out of me, but I shook my head and told her it wouldn't work. As always, she hugged me, stroked my back, and assured me everything would be okay. I wanted to believe her, but at that moment, I just couldn't. On Sunday, we met my sister and her family for lunch after church. There was a long wait at the restaurant, so she pulled me aside and had me lay it all out. She was 2 years older and had helped me through several high school crushes, so I opened up and told her almost everything, though I left out the details, though I suspected she had a hunch. "I know it's not going to be easy," she said later, "but I think you can make it work if you really love her. One date doesn't tell you everything, and if you had more, you might realize it's not as big as you think. But it might also show you there's something there worth fighting for." "Thanks, sis. And you're right. One date doesn't say it all, but it told me enough to know it would hurt a lot more to get close to her and then watch it fall apart because of the past. Listen, little brother, you won't know for sure until you try." I nodded and agreed to think it over. After that, our table was ready, and we didn't talk about it again, but it stayed in my mind on the trip home and the days that followed. Ethan understood me better than anyone and agreed with my thoughts. But on the drive home from a trip to a factory near LaGrange, I started to wonder, given how lucky Ethan was with women, was it really a good thing that he was agreeing with me? The weekend after I returned, Ethan set us up with a couple of women. We had fun, but the thought of Reagan still lingered. During the divorce, Reagan wanted to keep the house, but I made sure she had to sell it, forcing her to give up more than she wanted. It was petty, but it felt like karma, and I didn't regret it. I also had George handle the sale, as he and Reagan's lawyer were on good terms. He found out Reagan planned to buy a condo, and I later heard rumors that she and Noah were getting married. Concerned, I called George. "Reagan might be remarrying," I said. I'll check it out and stop the alimony payments if it's true, George replied. During the divorce, George argued I shouldn't pay alimony due to Reagan's infidelity, but the judge awarded her a small amount for 5 years, or until remarried. If she remarried, I'll confirm and get the payments stopped, George said. Some people never learn, I said, shocked that she and Noah might be together. This only reinforced my decision to cut things off with Melissa. George laughed. It keeps me in business. After hearing about Reagan and Noah's wedding, I decided to reach out to Will Kleiner, a friend from college who worked at Reagan's firm. Will and I had stayed in touch after I started dating Reagan. I met with him for lunch, and when I mentioned what happened, he said, I heard Woolliver asked to transfer. It all makes sense now. I asked about the firm's policy on these matters. Violating it could get them in big trouble, Will replied. I asked him to get me a copy of the personnel manual, and he agreed. A few days later, at a Braves game, Will handed me a flash drive with the information I needed. I brought it to George, who reviewed it. Even if you prove they knew about Noah's actions, George said, you can't sue. Georgia's laws don't allow it. The state removed alienation of affection in '79. I cursed under my breath. I just wanted to hit them where it hurts. Many have tried. Unless the firm knew about the misuse and did nothing, you won't get far, George said. But let's focus on spousal support first. We'll handle the other later. The next week, George filed a motion to end spousal support after discovering Reagan had remarried. Reagan's attorney opposed it, but the judge agreed with us, and the payments were stopped. Patience, George advised. 6 months later, George called. Noah's cautious right now. You're right to wait. Let's run a check now while the marriage is still fresh. It took 2 weeks, but Donna Hightower and one of her investigators proved that, as the saying goes, tigers don't change their stripes, or in this case, leopards don't change spots. Serial cheaters don't stop cheating. Noah Woolliver had started an affair with one of his new subordinates. So George took the information, packaged it neatly, and went to one of his lawyer friends. We don't want this coming back to you, Trent, because if whoever takes over Judge Johnson's position sees your involvement, Mr. Woolliver could lose his job. If that happens, Mrs. Woolliver could petition to have spousal support reinstated because of the impact your actions have had on her current husband. I'm not sure how she'd find out since I'm not going to tell her. And if anything happens to Noah, I bet he won't tell her the real reason. George smirked and wiggled his finger at me. Sneaky, sneaky. And it was. George's lawyer friend delivered the package to Noah's firm. Through my friend Will, I later learned that Noah had been escorted out by security the same day, and rumors were circulating that he wouldn't be coming back. It said that Reagan cried when she found out, asking why, but no one would tell her. Take that, a-hole, I said after our conversation ended. If I keep this up, I might become a bitter old man. Grinning to myself, I realized that was a risk I was willing to take. Not wanting to connect my name to it in case Reagan found out and took it to court to try to get her spousal support reinstated, I sent the package anonymously. That same day, the next evening, I got a call. Trent, Melissa Ortiz shouted, I know you probably never want to talk to me again, but I had to call and tell you. Noah called last night saying he'd been laid off from the firm due to downsizing and that he was going to file for a reduction in child support because of it. I called a friend at the firm and heard the rumors, and today I got an express package. Anonymous, of course, which probably explains everything and should help keep my spousal support payments the same when Noah files his petition. Trent, I think I know who I need to thank for this. So to that person, I say thank you. I chuckled. If you talk to the right person, they might just say you're very welcome if they could admit to it. As for what was in the package, well, some people never learn. I'm sure Noah will spin a sad story to the judge, and when my lawyer presents that information, I hope the judge uses those exact words against him. After all, he just remarried. I wonder if he jumped into another affair that quickly when we got married, Melissa mused. Don't think so. It's in the past, so leave it there. Just smile and enjoy life, okay? You deserve it. We said goodbye, probably for the last time. I smiled, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. I'd gone through the ordeal. I'd survived, and while some might disagree, I had returned as much hell and heartache as Reagan and Noah had put me through, pushing as far as I dared, but not too far. While she was probably cheating again, too. I had helped Reagan end up in a much worse financial position, in an apartment instead of a nice house, with a dysfunctional husband who paid alimony and child support through the nose. Plus, I knew she was in a relationship with a spouse who cheated regularly, but didn't bother to tell her, just as she hadn't told me about what she'd done. I had tried to give her the best and make her happy, but now I suspected she had more problems than she could handle. Yes, I had struck back at both of them, but I regretted nothing. Not a single thing. Moreover, as I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized I no longer thought of them with those harsh names that once filled my mind. Having received my revenge, I no longer cared what they thought. And that realization brought the biggest smile of all. But the smile didn't last, because in the following weeks I made another discovery, the hardest one of all. As much as I thought I'd gotten over Reagan and Noah, I was surprised to realize they still had power over me. When I thought I might have a chance at happiness with Melissa, I gave it up because of the memories of what my ex and Melissa's ex had done, the awkwardness they had caused both for me and, I'm sure, for her. Since then, I'd gone on a few dates and slept with several women, but once the pleasure faded, I realized more and more that I didn't care about any of it. Melissa, I finally acknowledged, was still in the back of my mind, just as much as Reagan and Noah. Even though I had taken my revenge and gotten my pound of flesh, I still wasn't free from them as long as I cared what they thought about anything. Not until I could look at them and laugh and say, "Look at what you gave up and what I might get because of it. Thank you for being so stupid." Then I would truly be free. At that moment, everything became clear, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I picked up the phone, went through my recent calls, and found the number she had called from the day she received the file on Noah's latest actions. I pressed the number to call back and hoped she would answer. Moments later, she picked up. "Hi, Melissa, it's Trent Giroux. Can we talk?" I asked. "Trent, you've helped me again recently when you didn't have to. I'm listening," she replied. "Something came to me tonight, an epiphany, if you will, and if I'm not too late and you'll let me, I'd like to talk to you about it to see if there's any chance of making a difference," I said. There was silence on the line, though I thought I heard breathing, so I continued. "Even though I told you to let go of the past, I realized that I had been so focused on what had destroyed my life that I didn't see I was looking backward instead of forward. I want to apologize for that. And if you agree, I want a chance to make things right, if you'll let me," I explained. Again, she didn't interrupt me. As I spoke, I could almost hear Melissa nodding her head, considering my words. To my relief, she wasn't dating anyone new, and to my surprise, she agreed to give us a fresh start and see where things went, to see if we could eventually be as compatible as we were that first night. We went on another first date the following weekend with clear intentions of taking things slow, but sometimes things unfold differently. She invited me in. As I walked her to the door, she took the glasses, I poured the wine, and we sat on the couch talking until 11. A few minutes later, I was already carrying her upstairs and gently seating her by the bed. After that, we lay there in silence. It felt too soon. It was only our second first date. But in my heart, I hoped it would work. And from the way she looked at me, I thought she might feel the same. Though we faced some challenges in the following months, we discovered that we agreed on far more important things than we realized. Many little things didn't matter when two people love each other deeply. Even though I thought I just liked her after our second casual date, with each meeting, I found myself liking her more, eventually admitting that it was much more than just liking her. Almost from the start, Melissa came to the same conclusion, and we began to plan and work together for our future. We both wanted that, so we got married. A little over a year later, we decided to try again. When the time came, little Ansley was our flower girl, and Melissa and I said, "I do," and truly meant it. As I expected, we've run into Noah a few times since then, but it hasn't gone the way I initially feared. The first time we were close, he tried to make a snide remark about me taking seconds, but I quickly cut him off in a whisper, just loud enough for him to hear. I said, "Noah, thanks so much for taking Reagan, the cheating hoe, off my hands. If you think she'll be more loyal to you than she was to me, you're even dumber than I thought. And thanks for making it possible for me to be with Melissa, the real woman you couldn't keep faithful to. Believe me, I got the best part of the deal." He almost choked and clenched his fists in anger, but realized I could have easily taken him down if he had touched me. Regaining himself to protect Ansley and me from any damage, he turned and walked over to his young daughter, picked her up, kissed her, whispered something to her, and then set her down, saying goodnight to Melissa. A few months later, he told her he was in the process of divorcing Reagan and had finally realized what I had said was true. When he began to suggest something, she immediately interrupted. "Too bad you didn't realize it until it was too late, Noah. Don't ever bring it up again." Since we've been together, Noah has never said a word to me about it, but I can still see the regret in his eyes whenever he sees us together, and I always smile, enjoying the present. Ansley is 6 now, and she's at Grandma and Grandpa Ortiz's house, while I'm holding Melissa's hand, her fingers gripping mine like there's no tomorrow. When the doctor gives the signal, Melissa pushes one last time. Finally, she leans back, and I kiss her sweat-drenched forehead as the doctor and nurse step back a little from the bed. After a moment, the midwife looks at us and smiles. "Mr. and Mrs. Giroux, congratulations. I know you didn't want to know beforehand, so let me be the first to tell you that you have a beautiful baby boy." And that's when I realized all the trials and struggles I had endured were worth it. I knew that no matter how hard it had been, I wouldn't change a thing.